Greetings, this is Dr. Ashlei, and I just wanted to stop by and interrupt your day or start your day to talk about sacrifice. So as I've told some of you in a few of my other videos, I've been in a mentorship group for Ark of Women under the leadership of First Lady Leslie. And so one of our focuses has been discipline, and within discipline, we're talking about sacrifice. Now with sacrifice, that is our ability to basically surrender something we want for something we need, especially when we talk in terms of a biblical perspective. And so one person that always stands out to me when it comes to sacrifice is Joseph. A lot of times, there are a lot of different perspectives on Joseph. A lot of times people say, he was arrogant, foolish as a child and had to go through his journey to mature. But in that, I do recognize that he honored God and he was loyal to God, and he had sacrificed his life to God. One of the ways that I felt like he did that was, first, he didn't care about the opinions of others. For instance, he started off having a dream. So he had a dream that his brothers, his father, and his mother, they would end up bowing down to him. And of course, that made his brothers jealous. But the reality is the fact that he received the dream. He believed the dream and he shared the dream. Now, it may not have been wise for him to share it, but he did. And to me, that also shows more about how he had surrendered, his thought process and sacrificed that to God. And then ultimately his brothers sold him into slavery. Now with that, God was with him at all times, showed him tremendous favor. He experienced quite a few things. One situation is when he was under the care of Potiphar, who was the Pharaoh's officer. And so within serving in Potiphar's house, he was blessed. He definitely, the abundance overflowed into Potiphar's household. But the downside is Potiphar's wife wanted to sleep with him. And once again, he sacrificed his freedom, being obedient to God and honoring the fact that he was not going to betray Potiphar. And it's interesting because in Genesis 39:9 it says, "So how could I do this immense evil, and how could I sin against God?" And so it just goes to show Joseph could have slept with her, but he recognized that his authority, his loyalty was to God and to Potiphar. Moving on through his life, he ended up in jail because Potiphar's wife lied on him. And so when he ended up in jail, once again, God showed tremendous favor upon his life. Even the prison guards, they didn't feel the need to, micromanage him or, involve themselves in a lot of things that he was handling in the prison. So he was a leader even in prison. But with that, he sacrificed his personal feelings because of the simple fact that there was one situation where a chief cupbearer and a baker who had been thrown in jail and were serving the Pharaoh, they basically had a dream and they needed it interpreted. And so who knows how to interpret dreams? Joseph. He didn't have to do that. But once again, he recognized the importance of honoring God, not just with his mouth, but with his gifts. He knew that those gifts were from God. And so the simple fact that he was willing to interpret those dreams, not knowing what would ultimately happen, but just to do it out of knowing that I have the ability, let me do it. Okay. And so even with that, he does interpret the dream, and eventually he does finally get out of jail. And later he gets the opportunity to interpret a dream for the Pharaoh. And so by doing that, he's shown more favor, and then he's put into a position of power. Now, the story doesn't end there because there ends up being a famine. And so Joseph is the son of Jacob, whose name is changed to Israel. Now, Jacob loved Joseph. If you know his history, Joseph is the only birth child from Rachel, and Rachel is the wife that Jacob loved. And so in that, when he lost Joseph, I'm pretty sure he was mortified. But he carried on with life. He thought his son had been killed because his brothers made up that lie. And so the reality is, there ends up being an opportunity for things to come back full circle. So there ends up being a famine, and so Joseph's brothers are sent to Egypt, where Joseph was sent to as a slave. And so Joseph does not tell them who he is immediately. It's almost like he kind of plays with them a little bit, but once again, I feel like he doesn't sacrifice. Well, he sacrifices his pride. He sacrifices his need to be right. I can think about us and our own flesh desires. A lot of times when people betray us and they do something wrong to us, we're like done. The F word, forgiveness, that's like, I'm not going to forgive. But once again, we know that he honored God and he was loyal to God. So he sacrificed his need to be right. He sacrificed his pridefulness. He sacrificed his feelings, those emotions that probably came over him. And he allowed himself to be a blessing to his brothers. If anything, I would say that those sacrifices allowed him to reconcile with his family and to restore peace in that household. One thing that stood out to me was in Genesis 45, when he does reveal himself to his brothers. He says in verse 4, "Then Joseph said to his brothers, 'Please come near me.' And they came near. 'I am Joseph, your brother,' he said, 'the one you sold into Egypt. And now don't be grieved or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there will be 5 more years without plowing or harvesting. God sent me ahead of you to establish you as a remnant within the land and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler over all the land of Egypt.'" So even with him sacrificing his need to be right, he sacrificed a worldly perspective. It's almost as if he sacrificed his flesh. He told himself, we're going to honor God. We're going to completely surrender self to God. And I really feel like Joseph walked in a sacrificial lifestyle, because in all things, in all spaces, in all situations, he honored God. And with him sacrificing and submitting his life to God, we were able to see how God favored him even in prison, which is remarkable because, for some people that is a horrible place to be. But for him, God blessed him. God truly blessed him, and he honored him, and he ended up rewarding him. And so it just goes to show that with sacrifice, a lot of times it has a negative connotation because it's a selfless act. It's a point where we choose to not focus on our own personal desires, but to say, you know what, God, what do you want me to do? And so if anything, this just taught me to make sure that whatever I do, I'm doing it as a sacrifice to God. And I'm not looking at it as so much a burden, but I'm recognizing that there are times where there will be a lot of times where I have to do things, I have to go through things that I do not like. But ultimately, if it's God's will, then I need to shift my perspective and be okay with it, knowing that God will redeem it, he will reconcile, and he will avenge whatever may have happened throughout their journey. So I hope this encourages you to really think about what you can sacrifice to ensure that you're honoring God and that you're trusting him, you're walking in his direction and under his provision and guidance. All right, so I pray this blesses you. Have a wonderful day. Bye.